Part 3 of Aino Folk-Tales by Basil Hall Chamberlain. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine. Part 3. Tales of the Pana-Umbe and Pena-Umbe Cycle. Note: Pana-Umbe means the person on the lower course of the stream. Pena-Umbe means the person on the upper course of the stream. Tale 28. Pana-Umbe, Pena-Umbe, and the Weeping Foxes. There were Pana-Umbe and Pena-Umbe. Pana-Umbe went down to the bank of a river and called out, "Oh, you fellows on the cliff behind yonder cliff, ferry me across." They replied, "We must first scoop out a boat. Wait for us." After a little while, Pana-Umbe called out again. "We have no poles," said they. "We are going to make some poles. Wait for us." After a little longer, he called out a third time. They replied thus, "We are coming for you. Wait for us." Then the boat started, a big boat all full of foxes. So Pana-Umbe, having first seized hold of a good bludgeon, feigned dead. Then the foxes arrived and spoke thus: "Pana-Umbe, you are to be pitied. Were you frozen to death, or were you starved to death?" With these words all the foxes came up close to him and wept. Thereupon Pana-Umbe brandished his bludgeon, struck all the foxes, and killed them. Only one fox did he let go after breaking one of its legs. As for the rest, having killed them all, he carried them to his house and grew very rich by selling their flesh and their skins. Then Pena-Umbe came down to him and spoke thus: "Whereas you and I were both equally poor, how did you kill such a number of foxes and thereby become rich?" Pana-Umbe replied, "If you will come and dine with me, I will instruct you." But Pena-Umbe at once said, "I have heard all about it before." With these words he pissed against the door-sill and went out. Descending to the bank of the river, he called, crying out as Pana-Umbe had done. The reply was, "We are going to make a boat. Wait for us." After a little while he called out again. They replied, "We are going to make the poles. Wait for us." After a little longer they started, a whole boatful of foxes. So Pena-Umbe first feigned dead. Then the foxes arrived and said, "Pena-Umbe here is to be pitied. Did he die of cold, or did he die from want of food?" With these words they all came close to Pena-Umbe and wept. But one fox among them, a fox who limped, spoke thus: "I remember something which once happened. Weep at a greater distance." So all the foxes sat and wept ever further and further away. Pena-Umbe was unable to kill any of those foxes, and, as he brandished his bludgeon, they all ran away. He did not catch a single one, and he himself died a miserable death. Literal translation, told by Ishanashte, 23rd July, 1886. Tale 29. Pana-Umbe, Pena-Umbe, the Fishes and the Insects. There were Pana-Umbe and Pena-Umbe. Pana-Umbe went down to the seashore, squatted on the sand, pulled up his clothes, and turning his back to the sea, opened his anus as widely as possible. Then all the whales and the salmon and the other good fishes, both great and small, thought it was a beautiful cavern in the rocks. They all swam towards it and crowded into it. Pana-Umbe was much pleased. When his inside was quite full, he closed his anus and ran home. When he got to the house, he closed the door and the window. Then he opened his anus again, and let out all the whales and the salmon and the other good fishes, both great and small, so that the whole house was full of them. They could not swim away, because the door and window were shut. So Pana-Umbe caught them all. Some he ate, and some he sold. So he became a very rich man. Then Pena-Umbe came down and spoke thus: "You were poor before. Now you are very rich. How have you managed to get so rich?" Pana-Umbe said, "Come and dine with me. I can instruct you while we are eating." So when Pana-Umbe had told Pena-Umbe how he had become rich, Pena-Umbe said, "I knew that before." With these words he pissed against the threshold and went out, down to the seashore. Then he did as Pana-Umbe had told him, and opened his anus as wide as possible towards the sea. Then he felt all the whales and salmon and the other fishes, both great and small, crowding in. When his inside was quite full, he closed his anus and ran home very quickly. When he got to the house, he closed the door and the window, and stopped up even the smallest chinks. Then he opened his anus again and let out all the whales and salmon and the other good fishes, both great and small, so that the whole house was full of them. But when they came out, what had felt like whales and salmon and all sorts of fishes were really wasps and horseflies and spiders and centipedes and other poisonous insects which stung him terribly. They could not get out because Penaumbe had closed the window and the door, and had stopped up even the smallest chinks. So Penaumbe was stung to death by the wasps and centipedes and other poisonous insects which had come home in his inside. Written down from memory, told by Kanariki, June 1886. Tale 30. Panaumbe, Penaumbe, and the Sea Lion. There were Panaumbe and Penaumbe. Panaumbe went down to the seashore and walked up and down upon the sand. Then he saw a sea lion in the water. He wanted to catch that sea lion and eat its flesh. So he called out to it, "Oh, Mr. Sea Lion, if you will come here, I will pick the lice out of your head." The sea lion was very glad to have the lice picked out of its head. So it swam to him. Then he pretended to pick the lice out of its head. But in reality, he picked the flesh off its head and the fat and ate it. Then he said, "All the lice are picked off. You may go." After the sea lion had swum a short way, it put its paw up to its head, in order to see whether the lice had really all been taken off. Then it felt that its flesh and fat were all gone, and that only the bones remained. So it was very angry, and swam back quickly towards the shore to catch Panaumbe and kill him. Panaumbe, when he saw the sea lion pursuing him, ran inland towards the mountains. After running some time, he reached a place where the path divided. An old crow was perching on a tree there, and said, "Right or left? Right or left? I see a clever man." The road to the right was broad, and the road to the left was narrow, because it was in a valley which ended in a point. Panaumbe thought thus: "If I take the broad path to the right, the sea lion will overtake me and kill me. But if I take the narrow path to the left, he will run so fast that he will get stuck at the end of the narrow valley, and I, being small, can slip out between his legs and beat in his head from behind and kill him." So Panaumbe ran along the narrow path to the left, and the sea lion pursued him. But the sea lion ran so heedlessly and quickly that it got stuck at the end of the narrow valley. Then Panaumbe slipped out between the sea lion's legs, and beat in his head from behind and killed him, and took home his flesh and his skin. Then Panaumbe became very rich. Afterwards Penaumbe came down to him and said, "You and I were both poor. How is it that you are now so rich?" Panaumbe said, "If you will come and dine with me, I will instruct you." So they went together to Panaumbe's house, where Panaumbe's mother and his wife and children were eating the flesh of the sea lion. But Penaumbe, when he had heard what Panaumbe had done, said, "I knew that before." Then he stepped in the dishes set before Panaumbe's mother and wife and children, and spilt their food. Then he pissed on the threshold and went away. Penaumbe went down to the seashore and saw a sea lion, as Panaumbe had done. He called out to the sea lion, "Oh, Mr. Sea Lion, if you will come here, I will pick the lice out of your head." So the sea lion swam to him. Then Penaumbe pretended to pick the lice out of its head. But in reality he picked the flesh and the fat off its head, and left nothing but the bones. The sea lion felt a little pain, but thought that it was owing to the lice being picked out. So when Penaumbe had finished picking and eating the flesh off its head, it swam away. But afterwards, feeling the pain more sharply, the sea lion put its paw up to its head, and found that nothing but bone was left. So it was very angry, and swam back quickly towards the shore to catch Penaumbe and kill him. Penaumbe, when he saw the sea lion pursuing him, ran inland towards the mountains. After running some time, he reached the place where the path divided. The old crow, which was perching on the tree, said, "Left or right? Left or right? I see a fool." Penaumbe took the broad road to the right, in order to be able to run more easily. But the sea lion ran more quickly than he could, and caught him and ate him up. Then Penaumbe died. But if he had listened to advice, he might have become a rich man like Panaumbe. Written down from memory. Told by Kanariki, June 1886. 31. Panaumbe Penaumbe and the Lord of Matomai. Panaumbe wanted very much to become rich. For this reason he stretched his penis across to the town of Matomai. Then the Lord of Matomai spoke thus: "This is a pole sent by the gods, so it will be well to dry all the clothes upon it." So all the clothes and beautiful garments were dried. After a time, Panaumbe drew back his penis, and all those clothes and beautiful garments came sticking to it. His house was greatly benefited. He became a very rich man. Afterwards Penaumbe came down and said: "My dear Panaumbe, what have you done to become so rich?" Panaumbe said: "Come and eat, and I will tell you." Afterwards Penaumbe said: "This is the thing I intended to do. Abominable Panaumbe, bad Panaumbe, you have forestalled me." With these words he pissed on the threshold and went out. Then he went down to the seashore, and stretched his penis across the sea to Matomai. The Lord of Matomai said: "This is a pole sent by the gods. It will be well to dry all the clothes and beautiful garments upon it." For this reason all the clothes and beautiful garments were brought down, and put upon the divine pole. Penaumbe wanted to become rich quickly by drawing back his penis. So he drew it back quickly. The divine pole moved, and the Lord of Matomai spoke thus: "It happened thus before. There was a pole sent by the gods. For this reason the clothes and beautiful garments were dried upon it. Then a thief stole the divine pole away. We all became poor. Now again our clothes and beautiful garments have been placed upon a pole. Now there seems to be a thief again. Quickly, cut the divine pole." For that reason the servants of the Lord all drew their swords. They cut the divine pole, and all the clothes and beautiful garments were taken. Penaumbe was left with only half a penis. He drew it in. Then he had nothing. Then he became very poor. If Penaumbe had listened to Panaumbe's advice, he might have had food to eat, he might have become rich. But he did not like to listen to advice. For this reason he became poor. Translated literally. Original communicated by Mr. John Batchelor, June 1886. Also printed in Ainu Memoir, page 133, but with the indecent expressions softened down. 32. Drinking the Sea Dry. There was the chief of the mouth of the river, and the chief of the upper current of the river. The former was very vainglorious, and therefore wished to put the latter to shame, or to kill him, by engaging him in the attempt to perform something impossible. So he sent for him and said: "The sea may be a useful thing in so far as it is the original home of the fish which come up the river. But it is very destructive in stormy weather, when it beats wildly upon the beach. Do you now drink it dry, so that there may be rivers in dry land only. If you cannot do so, then forfeit all your possessions." The other, greatly to the vainglorious man's surprise, said: "I accept the challenge." So on their going down together to the beach, the chief of the upper current of the river took a cup and scooped up a little of the sea water with it, drank a few drops, and said: "In the sea water itself there is no harm. It is some of the rivers flowing into it that are poisonous. Do you, therefore, first close the mouths of all the rivers, both in Ainu land and in Japan, and prevent them from flowing into the sea, and then I will undertake to drink the sea dry." Hereupon the chief of the mouth of the river felt ashamed, acknowledged his error, and gave all his treasures to his rival. Written down from memory. Told by Ishanashte, 18th November, 1886. End of Part 3. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine.